are you being the best that you can be at any given moment? I had a problem with getting out of bed. What is stopping you from doing those things? Then you find that there are very small things that you can implement that help, improve your productivity or whatever it is you're going through. Now, the challenge becomes not just can you win when you want to, but can you win when you're not feeling up to it? The whole city was lit up. You could see the Ipanema beach on the left and, all the lights in the city. And then right at the top was this tiny glowing figure, which was the Christ the Redeemer. And it was so high above the whole city range.
If you've ever wanted to understand why we should be asking for nature's help on mindsets, adventures, and more, then you're in the right place. So, welcome to Maximise Nature. Today's guest is reigning Paralympic champion Dimitri Coutya in wheelchair fencing for individual foil and épée. This episode focuses more on the benefits of simply getting out of the house and being active. Dimitri is the perfect example to me and everyone who is listening, and what they can achieve when you just step out of the house and chase your dreams. I hope this podcast encourages you to get out into the world and try something new. It can be an indoor or outdoor activity. It really is that simple. All you need to do is be active. We're going to explore with Dimitri what his thought process was leading up to, during, and after achieving Olympic glory. Then we will take the good thoughts and put them in a travel bag, ready to use on our next adventure. So, Dimitri, can you give the listeners a little bit of background information about who you are?
Sure. Firstly, thank you very much for having me, Max. Well, as you've already said, my name is Dimitri Coutya, and I'm a wheelchair fencer for Paralympics GB, and the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games that just happened a couple of months ago now was my third time competing for Paralympics GB at Paralympics Games. I've had a career that's so far spanned 15 years, and this was the first time that I'd won a gold medal and managed to double it up and become double Paralympic champion. So it's been several years in the making, but that's pretty much what I've devoted more than half of my life to doing.
How did your passion for fencing, getting up, going out to train every day and being active push you to Olympic glory?
I think there was a belief that was really instilled in me, and I must confess it wasn't something that I'd always had within me as a fencer. I think my ideas about what success and what commitment looked like has changed vastly from when I first started as an athlete. Because to put into context, I've just turned 27 now, so I've been doing fencing I guess since I was about 12 years old. But my understanding of what it takes to be a professional athlete has changed drastically, and it's something that even more recently, as of Tokyo just gone, I've made more I've made changes to the way I do things, and I think that's why Paris, the success from Paris came as a result of, in my opinion, doing the right amounts of work and the right kinds of work, but it could have come a bit sooner if I'd maybe taken on board the advice that other people had given me. And one of those bits of advice, coming back to the question, was it's not about winning or losing, or it doesn't really matter by how much you beat people by or whatever it is, or even the losses. Do I mean it's, are you being the best that you can be at any given moment? And if not, why not? And can you do better, basically? And if so, what is that thing? And that's a question. That continuous questioning process is something that we've instilled in our everyday practices, pretty much from the smallest things to whole training sessions to broader competition plans. We always ask ourselves what will make us the best possible fencer that we can be, which often extends to, are we being the best elite people that we can be at any moment? And I think that ethos for me is the driving motivation day in, day out, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you love something or how much you love doing something. There are going to be times, especially when it becomes your whole life, that you just don't want to do it. And that certainly became true for fencing. But now the challenge becomes not just can you win when you want to, but can you win when you're not feeling up to it? And that ethos of, are you being the best that you can be in any moment, was the motivation, rather than dreaming big and winning necessarily.
It's definitely trying to turn up, especially when you don't want to, and for me anyway, it's all about climbing that mountain and staying at the top. That's the difference between, say, the average athlete and someone who wins consistently. That's why there aren't many people right at the top. It's something that it's kind of not a hidden talent, but like a hidden background into every single person who's reached that pinnacle, as it were.
Yeah, like what you were saying is spot on, because the amount of times I've heard people say, yeah, it just wasn't my day, or it wasn't, this went wrong or that went wrong. At the end of the day, there are uncontrollables, and sometimes it's just not, you don't always win. That's a fact of life, but there's a lot more that you can do to make things, to prepare yourself, and, winning when you're feeling on top of it is, I'll say, relatively easy. Anyone can have their day, but the key to consistency is doing it no matter what is going on around you. Like, can you always show up as best prepared as possible?
That eventually, even if you have a run of bad days, those bad days will become a lot less significant if you keep on just showing up, doing what you need to do, and even say if you don't reach the top, you will be so much further than where you were if you had given up in that moment. But it's kind of the hardest thing about sport, really. It's just showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everyone has sport as I think they all see it as kind of, like a Rocky training montage, you know what I mean? Like, you get up and you're fighting for something that you really want, but at the end of the day, sport, or being successful at anything, involves being good at a wide variety of things, not just being good at the sport, do you know what I mean? You gotta be psychologically strong, you gotta be fit, and you gotta be logistically well prepared, and that often involves spending and devoting a lot of time to really mundane, boring things, and that aren't even necessarily physically difficult. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole lot of preparation that goes to being well prepared, if we can use that term. And often being well prepared is just the simple thing of doing something you just don't like doing, but you have to do that. And I think we all start out and gain, and we all start out with a hobby. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully everyone has a hobby, or people have things that they enjoy. And that's important. I myself have it. I wouldn't describe fencing as my hobby. Fencing has become my life, which often means that it's, to be honest, most of the time not enjoyable. The things that I work towards are the big competitions, such as the Paralympic Games. That focus has been part of my, has been the focus for more than half my life now. And because I think about it constantly, day in, day out, when I'm in training, it's just not enjoyable. And I think that kind of comes hand in hand with that constantly questioning and asking, are we as well prepared? Are we as good as we possibly can be? And that's just the job. So can you push yourself past the point where it's not enjoyable to make yourself as well prepared, so that you can then, grit through it, and then, reap the rewards later. Like now I can sit back for a little bit at least and enjoy what's just happened, irrespective of what happens in the future in my career. I know that now, because I've done all those, that I've managed to push through and, as you say, show up. I can take a little bit of time to reflect and enjoy the results that came a couple of months ago.
It's the same for people who are just, say, listen to this podcast. It's just finding a routine, staying consistent. If you're enjoying your hobbies, or staying in that routine, it's going to go into your working life as well, which I think for me is a really key point about the whole thing about getting active. You just need to, even if it's not physically active, just be mentally active, just stay switched on.
The one person I remember it being said very clearly was Marco Pierre White, actually. He said, perfection is lots of little things done well. If you're someone who struggles with, getting into a routine, or look at it more broad picture, like they're just not getting the most out of their day, and you desperately want to be on top of your business and making the most of your time, that is quite a big task if you just think about it like that and just go, oh, all I need to do is that. There's often, if you question a little bit and ask yourself what is stopping you from doing those things, then you find that there are very small things that you can implement that help, improve your productivity or whatever it is you're going through. A problem with mine was, speaking about the kind of motivation thing, I had a problem with getting out of bed on time. And it wasn't even necessarily that I was too tired to. I just did not feel like doing what I knew I had to do that day at training and getting ready for it. And that was probably 95% of how I felt for a good couple months, a couple of years before the games even. Every day it was this thing of just like, oh, I don't really want to. Like, inherently, this was making me a bit slow in the mornings. I wasn't necessarily making the most out of my preparation that I could be doing. So one thing, and when I asked, I was like, what actually is stopping me and making this process harder than it could be? And I realized that simply going on my phone added so much more time to my routine, because I was using it as kind of like almost some kind of like revenge procrastination, basically, of just like, getting kind of stuck in checking messages and doing all this and all that. So one of the smallest things that I did to help, we'll look big picture, to help win my gold medal, was I made it a point to not check my phone until I was dressed and ready to leave the house. Then, because I was ready and because I knew I didn't have anything else to do once I put the phone down, I was like, okay, cool. I've got 5 minutes now. I can check what I need to do. I can do what I want. I've given myself that time. That's a small reward. And suddenly, like, my productivity improved. I was able to turn up as early as I wanted to before the session started so I could prepare properly for it. And it made a huge difference. Do you know what I mean? So how do you achieve that? Like, or if someone asked me, how did I achieve those gold medals? It's small things like that. It wasn't necessarily anything, groundbreaking or impossible. Do you know what I mean? It's just small things like that. And that helped me do as well as I needed to do. And, looking back on it now, I can already think of things that I will do differently next time, because I think, this could be better. And I want to start this from the beginning. So it wasn't perfect by any means, but these were the small improvements that made the difference between double gold and not double gold.
Like you were saying, it is just the small things. The small things do add up. And for me anyway, I just wanted to reiterate that for everyone listening. Do the small things well, and the bigger things will get achieved. That's, what's his name? Kobe Bryant's quote. Who or what moment inspired you to go for Olympic glory? And when did you realise that you had a massive chance to achieve this?
I guess there were several points in my life where that added fuel to the fire, shall we say. I was always relatively active as a kid. I tried several different sports. I did wheelchair basketball for many years, actually. I think about 7 years or so. And one day, a man turned up. His name was Adi Adepitan, and he won bronze. I think it was in Sydney or Athens. I can't remember which, but he was incredible. Like watching him practice on the court, and the way he moved and all these things. Like it just screamed professionalism, and it screamed like like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And I saw that and I thought, God, I want to do that, basically. And, at the time I thought it was going to be basketball, because that's the thing I was seeing. Now, looking back on it, I didn't necessarily want to be good at basketball. I wanted to be as good at something as he was at basketball. And I wanted to feel like I belonged. I wanted to feel like I belonged as much as he looked like he belonged doing that. So yeah. I then found fencing a few years later, and I think that was one of the main sports that really clicked with me, because it takes a team to produce the kind of results that we're aiming for, and countless people, both technical staff, coaching, teammates, and otherwise, i.e. friends and family and general supporters, have helped me get to where I am. But at the end of the day, fencing's an individual sport. Like you're on the beast on your own, and you're not letting anyone else down necessarily, because it's not like I failed to catch the ball, or I didn't do that pass correctly, but at the same time, your wins and losses are all on you. Like if you mess it up, then ultimately it's your fault and you weren't as prepared as possible. And something about that kind of nature really appealed to me. And fencing as well is a very creative sport that's got a lot of room for individuality in it, and you can really see people's kind of personalities reflected through it. So, and I just thought something about that and the wide scope of problem solving and who can just come out on top was really, really appealing to me. That's kind of where that initial kind of fire for fencing kind of came from. And, having said all this about the sport and how incredible it is, because this is all true from my perspective, initially I started it out because I was a big fan of Star Wars and Pirates of the Caribbean. I was a bit of a nerdy kid, and I just thought sword fighting in films was, really really cool and, all that kind of thing. And then, you sign up for the session and the first thing they say is it's not at all like the films. And then once you get over that initial disappointment, I quickly discovered and fell in love with those things that I just described about the sport. So yeah, maybe it wasn't quite what I expected it to be at the beginning, but yeah, for sure, it's one of the most incredible things I've ever done. But I guess later on, I'd say one of my big motivators as well was my actual teammate who was the champion from Tokyo, Piers Gilliver, because he taught me a lot about him and many others, but he taught me a lot about what his ideas of being a professional athlete were. This whole, you're an elite athlete, you're an elite person 24/7, like, are you being the best that you can be? And that really, at first I didn't really understand what he was saying and didn't fully take that on board, but as I matured a bit and I got older, I watched him break achieve results that hadn't been achieved for many years. I realized it kind of sunk in a little bit more what he was telling me, and I really did my best, especially the last few years, to embody that in everything I did. So he's been a big inspiration as well, but there's been countless others. I've been fortunate to meet so many incredible people over my career, both in and out of sport. And I think a lesson that I've learned, and I think that's applicable to everyone, is really listen to what someone's saying, irrespective of what they come from or what they do. Do you know what I mean? So, because you can find inspiration in a lot of surprising areas.
I love the part you were talking about fencing being a really creative sport. And I think that's something that everyone can draw on. It doesn't necessarily have to be fencing, but there are so many ways you can be creative. And that's something I really want to get across to everyone in the audience. What's your thought process / mentality when you have those difficult days on your way to goal, whether that be in training or when you just feel like giving up? What sort of like keeps you going, as it were?
I focus on the small things because, again, I think, I don't know, I mean, I admire people who are able to do this, but I always struggled. I found that unless time was getting closer to the actual games, like actually thinking about the games didn't do much for my motivation. Obviously, when we got to a couple months out, it was a lot more kind of, it was a lot. It was like overhanging over my head. Basically, it was at the back of pretty much all my thoughts, and irrespective of who I was talking to, like I was constantly thinking about Paris, to be honest. But when you're a couple of years out from it, 3-4 years out from it, it's that doesn't motivate you necessarily, or especially when you've done it a few times, like I have. Like it because it starts to feel a little bit more routine. It doesn't have quite the same kick. So in order to make sure that I'm still, doing what I need to do and pushing hard and working hard, I focus on the small things, because I think I really believe that you're much more likely to put in the quality for something short term and immediate that you're going to see quickly, but that it will help you for a longer period to come, basically, or more in the future. So where I struggled day to day with motivation or whatever it was, I basically gave myself small achievable goals that I knew would help me in the long run. And if I did those, and I knew that I'd done everything that I could, given how I was that day or whatever constraints there were on me that day, then I'd have to be, I told myself to make sure I was happy with that and turn up and just try and improve on it tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%. Like the fact you reiterated just the small things really says all it really needs to say, because there are so many people, I'm definitely one of them sometimes, that doesn't want to do the small things but knows how important it is to do the small things. What are some of the day-to-day challenges you face that could stop you from being active in the sport that you love?
I think everything, to be honest. Like everyone will know that life gets in the way a lot, and it comes at you from quite a mundane perspective sometimes, and sometimes quite, unfortunately, shocking or unforeseen things, and that could literally be anything. And I've been very fortunate in that I haven't the main challenges that I faced weren't necessarily external things. There were some of that, but a lot of it came from kind of my own headspace as well. So I think you got to ask yourself and remember what it is that what you're doing gives you and why it's a good thing and why you started to do it in the first place. Because, fighting day in, day out, trying to make those improvements, it's very difficult sometimes to remember why you started doing it in the first place. And fencing gave me so much more than medals. Like it really taught me a lot about mindset and my way of thinking, and it taught me a lot about my own personality. So, and I really think it's very true. Like it's a truism of anything. Like if you want to be good at something, then you almost have to really understand yourself, because your head is what's driving all your decisions, and your head controls your body in a sense. And like if you don't understand how that works, then how can you possibly hope to know how to look after yourself in the difficult times? Not only that, but like understand why you're feeling a certain way at a certain point. I'd say understanding myself was a big challenge, and one that I didn't necessarily know when I was still finding out. I think we all still are, learning more about ourselves. I can certainly say a few years ago that I didn't know myself very well, and that definitely did present its challenges with this long-term goal that I was trying to achieve. I'd say really question yourselves, whether you like the answers or not, because at the end of the day, like we are who we are, nobody's perfect, but if we understand the way that we work and the way that we operate and accept that, then we can start putting in things in place to either help us, support us, or change bits that we actually think we need to change.
Like countless people have said before, everyone's different. Everyone has different things that works for them. What works for you might not work for another person. And even with like simple things like exams and stuff, someone might just be able to sit and read a bunch of like notes and stuff and learn it like that. Whereas for me anyway, I love a mind map because it just sets everything out in my brain.
And that's a perfect example. And I think, again, this is one thing that we champion really well. Like we really appreciate not the need for individuality, but we just understand that we are different, despite us all trying to achieve the same thing. And the way we do that is very different. And that's, even though the principles might be the same, the actual execution of that is going to be different. Never ever do something just because someone else is doing it. That whole questioning ethos is very important for us, because we need to understand what we're doing and why, more importantly. Like, what is this going to achieve? Because when we know what we're trying to achieve, we can look at the thing that we've been asked to do, and then we can say, okay, that makes sense, but is there a better way of doing it? Maybe we can do this. Would that achieve the same thing? Or the big one is as well, don't necessarily just copy what other people do, irrespective of how successful they are. Look at what other people do and say, yeah, that works because of this, this, this. So what lessons from that can I learn for myself? That for me is a better thing. But like I would never ever tell people to go and copy my training routine or my psych processes or whatever, because they're tailored to me, and mentally and physically I'm going to be very different to you or anyone else, pretty much.
So for athletics and everything, I think the most important things when I look at the long distance people, the sprinters, they all have that one thing, which is their passion for it. And if you don't have that passion for it, and someone you want to copy does, it's not going to work. Or it'll work for temporarily, just not get you anywhere near where you think you should be. Now, Dimitri, you've been lucky enough to head out to some pretty incredible places like Rio, Tokyo, Paris, etc. on your Olympic journey. What would you say the best thing about actively experiencing new places and building relationships with different people in different walks of life on the global stage?
What's great about meeting so many different people from, as you put it, so many different walks of life, is that everything you hear sometimes is a challenge to your own beliefs, which I think is a good thing. I think it's very hard to be certain about anything, but we can only go off of what we know and what we believe from personal experience. When you meet someone who potentially has a different opinion to that, and you actually listen to them and what they're saying, it really makes you, again, go through that questioning process that I've talked about before, just now. And it makes you revisit a belief maybe you forgot you had, or you thought you had locked down. And then you realize, maybe there is another side to this that I didn't think about before. And I think opening yourself up to that kind of listening to other things that may necessarily be different to what you believe does, I think, make you more well-rounded if you, or more balanced if you really do look at them purposefully. And, I've been fortunate to meet, again, some very, very incredible people from very, very different areas of life. We don't get to see a lot of the places that we go to because we're quite focused on the competition. But, I've been very fortunate that I've seen some of the fantastic, views and wonders that, the world can provide. One of the ones was Rio in particular, combined with the fact that it was my first Paralympics, and that was something in and of itself. That almost shock didn't really register, didn't really digest it until weeks after we'd come home. But being there for the first games, but also being there to see some of the incredible places that Rio had to offer was, just absolutely insane. I remember we went to see the Christ the Redeemer statue, and I remember going at the time thinking, we'll probably get to the base of it and we can look at it from probably just the bottom of the hill. But they made it so accessible, and like you were able to go right up to the viewing platform, and it was incredible, and it was one of the highest points of the city. And then we came back down and we went across to the other side of the city, and we went up one of the cable cars to the Sugarloaf Mountains. Then we took another one from the shorter peak to the higher peak. And we had, like there was beautiful food up there, and, we were in the trees and amongst the trees and had a beautiful view of the city. And I remember we were heading back to go back to the Paralympic Village. And, I stopped off at the toilet very quickly before we left. And, I went inside and I came out, and I can't have been more than a few minutes. But because Brazil was obviously, Rio was so close to the equator, it got dark pretty much instantly. So, in the time that I'd gone in, it went from almost from very bright evening light to night, pretty much. It was quite strange. It wasn't something that I'd really, thought about or experienced before. And the whole city was lit up. You could see the Ipanema beach on the left, and, all the lights in the city. And then right at the top was this tiny glowing figure, which was the Christ the Redeemer. And it was so high above the whole city range that, I was like, irrespective of what happens in fencing and at the competition, which is why we travel, and that will always be the primary focus for me, like to have been able to experience these kinds of places is an incredible opportunity. So, I really do think everyone talks about wanting to travel and wanting to see the world and stuff. And, I think it used to sound like a very kind of like popular thing to want, but I think because you get to see different things, you're taken out of the bubble that is your everyday life, then it is really important to do. And I think that just helps as a person as well. But if you actually look at the culture and talk to the people there and really listen to what other people say, then, I think at the end of the day, it can only bring benefits to you, I think.
I've been lucky enough to go to, Europe, Zambia in Africa, do like little mock debates, as it were, help out at orphanages in Africa and France and stuff. And how old am I? 20? Yeah, I'm 22. No, but the point is,
when you're busy.
The point is that that experiencing new cultures and different cultures, different way of life, etc., really gives you that sort of richness to not only your mindset but your sort of approach to everyday life. Really, more often than not, and it's kind of the reason I'm doing this entire podcast. If you just get outside and get outside of not only the house, but the metaphorical like comfort zone, you're gonna grow. You're gonna get better and better anyway. Yeah, I think it's just the most amazing thing that we are living in an age where we can not just go because of expenses and everything, but we can see so many different things and experience and meet so many incredible people.
I can give like a small example of how that helped me a lot. I think most people listening can relate, but when you're really stuck into a project or you're trying to work on something, like you get very, very one-track minded, and almost like it's almost like you don't matter anymore, and like this thing that you're working on kind of like consumes everything in the forefront of your thoughts, and it doesn't matter like what's aching or what feels uncomfortable or what's not feeling right. You know what I mean? You're so singularly focused, and that's a good thing to do sometimes. You know, it's good to get lost in your work a bit, but over extended periods of time, like I said, you get lost and you kind of forget why you started it, and it doesn't necessarily feel great. So one of the things that Piers, my teammate, really pushed me to do was just take a weekend. And this was about a month before we went to Paris. So he said, go somewhere different, do something fun. It's not a weekend for fencing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a weekend for preparing for the games. Go book a place with your partner, do whatever you want. Like, but make sure it's a weekend out of the games, because, you know, like, it's not benefiting. Like, there comes a point where too much is detrimental. And, you know, I found a beautiful place in South Downs, the forest, just a little kind of like garden extension, and I stayed there for a couple of days. You know, it was like quite quiet. It was removed. It was very different to, you know, day-to-day busy life and being stuck in the fencing room with all our sweaty kit and, you know, all the notes that we were taking and all that kind of thing. So it was a world apart. And honestly, it was like someone had recharged, like literally plugged me into a wall, and I felt so much more energized, and, you know, and it really helped almost, you know, push me over the line for the next month or so. And then Paris came and went, and now I could properly enjoy it. But doing, again, small things like that, just to change from your routine, sometimes really does help. And it doesn't have to be as big as going away for a weekend. Like, sometimes working in a different cafe, or taking a walk down taking a different route home. Small things like that really do help, because I find, like, where we get used to going and doing the same things and being in the same places, like, you really stop taking in the stuff around you, because you kind of expect whatever's there to be there. But when you're in somewhere new, instinctively you're going to want to, like, look and kind of take a step out of how you're feeling and take in what's different around you. And, you know, so all these things that we just described are varying extreme or varying intensities of that kind of principle.
On that note, I think I might know roughly where, because I'm from somewhere near Rish to South Downs, and there are some there are some really beautiful, absolutely beautiful, like, places to stay over, walk. If you want, I can message you them. If you
that would be perfect. Yeah, I'll probably look for probably for next summer when it gets a bit warmer again. Yeah, definitely would be, because I do love South Downs. Yeah.
100%. Not to backtrack a little bit, but you were saying about you've had the opportunity to meet so many different people in so many different walks of life, because I'm sure you have a load of different pieces of advice that they've given you. What's one that really stood out to you?
One thing that really did stick with me, and again, it's something I mentioned before, is question things, because you'll be surprised what you learn about things that you thought were taken for granted. You know, at the end of the day, like, some of the biggest innovations in the world were quite simple, but they came about as a result of someone asking a question. Even if it's been around for forever, like, take some time to really understand what it is this thing that you're studying is, or what you're trying to do is, because when you really understand something, then you can start to go about the right way as preparing for it, or otherwise. Do you know what I mean? Like, that questioning process, I think, is really important, and I think it's the first step to doing anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If anyone
100%.
asks, if anyone asks you to do a task, then I think the first thing you do should be to ask a question, whether it's internal or to the person asking you to do it. Because how can you possibly hope to do something if you don't understand what it is?
Always lived by, there's never a stupid question. It's just you're too afraid to ask it.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how simple you think a question is. At the end of the day, like, if it gives you something you didn't know beforehand, it can't hurt you. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. What training plans, books, social media posts, and guides have you used to prepare yourself, or even after you go to train, and could you recommend any to the audience?
The thing that we did well was we understood again, we asked that question of what are we trying to achieve and what is the best. So, I could visualize what I wanted to look like in Paris years ago. Do you know what I mean? Straight after Tokyo, pretty much. And the process will be repeated for LA going forward. I'm going to take some time to really think like, what am I going to be then? And how do I get there? Get to where I am now to there. Once you know what it is you want to do, then I turned to people who were more knowledgeable than I and said, this is what I want to achieve. How do I get that? Pretty much. And I think the thing that I would recommend to people is you've got to almost roll with the punches a bit. It's a work in progress. Sometimes you're not going to spring forward with the right answer or the right method straight off the get-go. And that's fine. As long as you, like you said, you're questioning it and monitoring it, and you're constantly going like, okay, so what was that? How did that work? What could I do better next time? I think that's the best that you can do, really. I think for me, it was more about kind of understanding my head, my body, and where I wanted to get to. So, and I think the same should be said for everyone. There are principles and methods of training that will apply to, because they've been scientifically tested, that will help you to improve things that you're looking for. But at the end of the day, we are all individuals. So, you shouldn't necessarily blindly be following anyone else's routine. Find out how your body works and what's best for you. Take the time to ask that question. Don't just run into something and hope it, like with a desperate need to just achieve it straight off the bat. Like, everything's a work in progress, pretty much. And I think that's one thing that I had to take on board quite a lot and learn, and start being okay with. And I did that a lot for Paris. I stopped worrying about what other people were doing, and I just focused on myself, and that really made all the difference. So I'd say to everyone else, don't worry about anything specific in terms of training or social media in that kind of sense. I think find whatever is helpful for you. That's your prerogative, and that's very individual, and those things are important. But ask yourself, if you're doing the best that you can do at any given moment, that's all you can do. And then, results, achievements, whatever it is that you're going for, they kind of come as a secondary to that belief. Yeah. I think everyone chases medals or money, and, those things, very valid things to go for, especially in this day and age. But medals are a symptom of that belief working rather than the thing to aim for.
We've definitely seen throughout this episode anyway, is that it's just about you. It's not about anyone else. It's about, like you said, the small wins, the building consistency, the doing the little things right, so you get the bigger things, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone's different. I think anyway, we as a human race are really creative beings. No, but I think as long as we're trying our best, and I've lived by that ever since I was born, because my dad's always like, whatever happens, as long as you tried your best, then that's all you can really ask. Then that's all you can really ask for, really. Speaking of things that I ask for if I was ever struggling, is there a treat or something you treat yourself to as sort of a mental booster?
Well, my go-to used to be food, but unfortunately, I had to be, I can't be doing that all the time, especially doing what I do. What I did was I gave myself things that I did with people as something to look forward to. So, on the weekend, I looked forward to, I knew that if I got through the week and I did however X amount of mundane or difficult things I needed to do and I knew I needed to do, I would be like, I can enjoy switching off and going to the cinema with my friend, or can go enjoying, or even, we'll come back to the food thing. You're like, obviously you got to eat right, and you got to do, you got to be strict and eat the things you need to be eating. But that obviously means you can enjoy yourself. It's never 100% on anything, and I love my food. I love trying new places, and there's so much so many great things out there to go and experience.
Definitely.
So one of the things I did with my partner a lot was we'd go and try, like we'd say, oh yeah, this place looks cool. We'll go there next time we're treating ourselves to something. So I give myself that to look forward to at the end of the week, for example. So, small, and again, it comes back to those small things help. There's very little time sometimes to do something huge and groundbreaking, but those kind of things of just like a simple walk or trying out a new place to eat or seeing a new film or listening to some new music or going to a museum or whatever it is, something different to your normal routine is massively helpful to do. And, I tried to do that at least once a week. Obviously, a few months before the game, there just literally was no time to do that. But even then, I was like, I need to get through these couple of months and this is just what I need to do now. Once I'm done, I'll reward myself with doing these kind of things.
Exactly. It's all about treating yourself, really. Speaking of treats, exactly. Let's play a game of Sweet Truth.
Okay, so it's basically two truths and a lie, is it? Or one truth and two lies?
One truth and two lies, yeah.
One truth and two lies. Okay. I think in fencing and all the factors that kind of go with being a good fencer, I think there is at least one thing that I am the best in the world at doing. People always believed I could do it. And the third one was I entertained myself for 3 hours at a competition once, trying to roll an empty plastic bottle up the side of a lampshade and getting it to land perfectly on top.
I guess the first question is, were you successful in the bottle thing?
Let's say yes.
Let's say yeah. Okay, cool. Who was the first person to tell you that you could do it?
I guess it would be my first coach at school, John Sloman.
And what is the thing you believe you're the best at in fencing? My
attacks are very strong.
That they are. I was watching YouTube videos yesterday. They are definitely strong. I'm gonna go for the bottle and the lampshade is the truth, just because it's definitely something
that is the truth. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I think definitely like the other two was, I'd say my psychology is probably one of the strongest in the world, but all these factors that kind of go with fencing, I can always think of maybe at least one person who can do them slightly better than me. Like I'm not a perfect individual or a perfect athlete, but that's okay. Like I always do the best I can do.
Yeah.
And I aim to make myself as well balanced and as well rounded as possible when it comes to the big events, which is, I think, what I did better. But any one individual thing, I guess my message is don't be disheartened if you think like someone does it better than you. Maybe they do, and that's fine. Like all you can do is try and improve yourself as much as you can, and you'll still achieve things that you're looking for, I guess. And the other one was like, I spent a lot of the time, especially pre-Tokyo. Pre-Tokyo was a very difficult time for me mentally. I really didn't believe that I was going to do it at all. And in all honesty, I was very convinced that I would probably retire after Tokyo because that's how little I was enjoying it. But, once Tokyo came and went, I reflected on it a lot and I looked back and understood why I was feeling the way I did. I'm quite glad I didn't quit in the end, because if I think about how I felt back then to how I was afterwards and how I feel now, there were obviously a lot of difficult times between Tokyo and then, but Tokyo and now. But it doesn't matter how much you think it's not. It doesn't matter. Like if you really don't think that you can do it, like you got to kind of stick with it and like trust that process, because you will surprise yourself. Yeah.
Did you do it? Did you do it?
Yeah. Yeah. That was it.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Almost more enjoyable than any medal I could have gotten at that competition.
With you mentioning earlier about LA, would you say that's your next sort of adventure, as it were?
I think that is one of my big goals for the future, but I think my other one is perhaps less specific, but I think starting to look a little bit more at life aside from fencing, because while it is still probably one of the most important things in my life to me, I think it's good to have a bit more things available to you, shall we say. Like I spend a huge amount of my time being an athlete and being a fencer particularly. And because I've had such a singular focus on that, and that is how you need to be sometimes, that it's just sidelined some other things that maybe I could look to explore. So I think LA is still, I'm still looking to be an athlete and qualify for my fourth games and hopefully defend the titles that I've just won. So that definitely is one of my main goals for the future. But the other one, I guess, would be taking some time to do and find things that I enjoy more outside of fencing. Like photography was one that briefly crossed my mind. Like, could I, one of the things I'm looking to do now is try it out a little bit or look into it a little bit more. And also taking the skills that I learned from being an athlete and being a fencer in terms of problem solving and planning and that kind of thing, and thinking like, how can I almost help further advance these kind of skills? What can I do to help supplement that? And what careers are there out there for those kind of things? So I think that would be my current goal, especially in the next few months before I go back to full-time training, as I've taken a short break, shall we say. So I think that would be my next goal, like just explore my interests a bit more. But LA for sure is one of the more definite future goals.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I will say is get yourself down to the South Downs if you want some incredible photos. One last task. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me a motivational phrase that I must get into my next podcast episode without my guest knowing? It doesn't have to be now. You can just message it me at some point. But yeah.
So is it kind of like something funny or something a bit unusual, but you have to try and make it a thing, or just any kind of motivational quote?
Can literally be anything. It would be quite fun to try and get a confusing one in though. But yeah.
All right, I'll have a think about it. I've got an idea for one already, but I'll let you know.
And on that note, did you get the one I fitted into today's episode?
No, I haven't actually. What was it?
It was right at the start. It was climb that mountain.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, yeah, no, I think, you very subtly put that in there. So, no, I didn't spot that.
Okay, no one's managed to spot any of them yet. It's a win. Yeah. Was there anywhere for the listeners to follow you or find out even more about what you do as a profession?
So, my Instagram handle, which is probably where I post most of my news, is Dimitri Coutya, and that's spelled DIMITRICOUTYA, all one word. Competitions in wheelchair fencing in particular, they're all getting streamed to YouTube these days. If you just look up IWAS, which is all in capital letters, IWAS, which is our International Federation, and then wheelchair fencing, you'll usually come up with you'll get the website, you'll get when the competitions are happening, and pretty much most of the fights are live streamed from the quarterfinals onwards. So I really do, recommend it. Like, if any of you sports enthusiasts out there, and even if you don't like sports that much, give it a watch, because the amount of people I've spoken to who have never really seen it before, all of them come over and they say this was one of the most dynamic and exciting sports that we've seen, especially from the games, because this sheer explosiveness and the speed of it is I think unlike any other sport. It's incredibly amazing to watch. So yeah, please do give it some support, especially if it's something that you enjoy, because it's one of those sports where it's beautiful and it's incredible, but it's just not that well known. So every little viewer helps, and every little support that it can receive is really great. So yeah, that's my personal Instagram handle, and yeah, please do give it a follow if you think that it's something you'd be intrigued by, or if you want to follow up on my news at all. Yeah, please, thank you.
Kind of on that note, my mum was the one who got me into fencing. My mum used to be massively into it. Like, she competed.
Oh, really? That's great.
Thank you, Dimitri, for sharing those inspirational thoughts with us.
Oh, no, that's really kind of you. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to have you on, honestly.
No, thank you very much for having me. Cheers. And yeah, I really hope it was useful, and I hope that your listeners as well enjoy it. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, for taking the time to listen to what I have to say.
The focus on accept who you are and get to understand yourself is such a good starting point for us all. Take small steps, focus on what works for you, because everyone's different. It's such a great piece of advice for everyone. Sharing your story about how significant it was to change your getting up practice, for example, where you put that phone down, ask simple questions at the start, and understand what you want and need to do. It was good to share with you how the natural world helped you to refocus, get away from the routine, and how refreshed taking that step outside made you, as well as gave you an unexpected treasured memory in Rio. This is what we need to do more of. Take that step outside and go beyond the front door. Thank you again, Dimitri. If there is anything you guys listening take away from this episode, I hope it's that the small things really do matter, and how important it is to stay active, as you never know what blessings the natural world will give back to you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Dimitri, and I'll see you guys later. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow Maximise Nature on Instagram for more nature-based content. See you next time.